Up now for the Open Men's Quad Sculls, and Sydney University, a composite in lane 3, UTS in 4, the Pine Rivers composite in lane 5. In lane 6, it is now a Mercantile composite. They've changed the name because they've had a change in the stroke seat there. It was Cameron Girdlestone. It is now Ben Williams from Fremantle. And the ANA composite is in lane 7. We have seen a lot of changes to the program in the last 30 minutes or so because of injury and illness. It's been a long regatta, and we're about to get underway in the Open Men's Quad Sculls, lane 4. We can see the UTS crew there. Franz Gravenhorst. He's a visiting German sculler who is studying in Australia. Biomechanics is the subject that he's studying, and this crew was second at the New South Wales titles. As we look across the course near perfect conditions, Sydney University in lane 6.
Sydney University Mercantile.
And I guess the name change comes about because of the change in the stroke seat to a certain degree, doesn't it?
That's right. When a new stroke steps in, the crew is named after that stroke.
And so we are away in the Open Men's Quadruple Sculls. On the far side of the course in lane 3, it is the Sydney Uni composite with the stroke Nicholas Purnell, and this is the Australian crew for the World Cup on Sunday, so you would expect them to dominate this race, as we saw just a moment ago in the men's 4s. In lane 4, it is UTS. Franz Gravenhorst is the stroke. In lane 5, the Pine Rivers composite. And then in lane 6, Sydney University Mercantile composite. And in lane 7, it is the ANA composite from Western Australia. And on the far side of the course, it is the Sydney Uni composite currently leading. The reason why Pine Rivers are in the middle of the course is that they were the only crew that decided to test themselves and go for a row. But we can see the Australians on the far side of the course. A little bit of a test here coming from the Mercantile composite, alongside them the ANA. But as they shift through the first 150 metres, it is the Sydney Uni composite with Nicholas Purnell. He was in the Olympic 8 in 2012. Shane Jackson, Tom Swan and Chris Morgan, all very experienced rowers. Tom Swan was in the 8 in London too, and of course Chris Morgan was in the men's quad in London and Beijing. And they were the world champions too in the quad in 2011. It's great to see Chris Morgan continuing to row.
That's right. This crew has a lot of experience, but not necessarily in this boat class, which makes it really interesting. They've only rowed a couple of times, but it will be really an interesting experiment to see how this crew comes together throughout the World Cup.
Yes, and Shane Jackson's in the team too, I might add. He was an under-23 former national team member, and in the centre of the course, and we can see the ducks there just moving away. But in lane 3, it is the Sydney Uni composite. Normally, what you'd have in these races is the faster crews in the middle of the course. But because there was only one crew who decided to go in the heats, and that was the Pine Rivers composite, that's the reason why Pine Rivers in lane 5. But they're doing okay at the moment, but well out in front. In fact, they lead by almost a boat length now. The Sydney Uni composite in lane 3. The coach is Mark Prater. He's based at Sydney University. And this crew, just like the men's 4 just a moment ago, having a little bit of a workout, a little bit of a blowout in the lead up to the World Cup on Sunday. Also worth noting that a number of these rowers will be in action in the Interstate 8s tomorrow. King's Cup and of course the Queen's Cup's on tomorrow as well.
Yes, that's right. So a number of the Australian athletes will be doubling up for their State of Origin tomorrow in the inaugural King and Queen's Cup. So it's one of the biggest events on the Australian sporting calendar, and fortunately will be a part of this rowing festival and on day 2 of the Rowing World Cup. And so everyone is very, very excited about competing in the King and Queen's Cup. It is one of the biggest races in the year, and certainly one of the most passionate races that you'll ever watch. That men's King's Cup 8, where Victoria and New South Wales in particular will go head to head. And of course Tom Swan will be racing for Victoria, and Nick Purnell in the stroke seat of that quad will be racing for for New South Wales.
And through 1,000 metres, look at that dominant performance too from the Sydney Uni composite. And they're rowing in lane 3. Nicholas Purnell, Shane Jackson, Tom Swan, Chris Morgan. And Tom Swan, he's now rowing in a sculling program. Of course, he was very much a sweep rower, wasn't he?
That's right. Both Nick and Tom were part of the sweep squad for the last 4 years. Two of the very strong rowers are part of that squad. And here they've taken to sculling in no time at all. And they look really long, really relaxed. And they're doing it pretty easily. I mean, it's always a little bit deceptive looking at it on screen. Rowers have a knack of making it look a lot easier than it is. But they are doing a very fine job at this point, and certainly dominating this field. But I think they'll have a little bit more of a challenge ahead of them on the weekend at the World Cup. But certainly a good one under the belt for them them at this stage.
Yes, through 1,200 metres, and they lead by 1.5, almost 2 boat lengths. And the Pine Rivers Composite not doing a bad job of it. Chris Anderson, Patrick Storman, Jordan Smith and Michael Smith. And in the time trial, their time was 6 minutes 47, which was pretty quick considering the conditions. But it is very much the Sydney Uni Composite leading by 1.5 boat lengths from the rest of the field. The UTS combination in second place at the moment with Gravenhorst, Reedman, Peel and Aducci. But it is very much in first place Sydney Uni with Daylight almost second. The Mercantile Composite just moving up there. Sydney Uni, Mercantile Composite with Ben Williams replacing Cameron Girdlestone in this crew. Andrew Kernow, Lachlan McKinnon and Andrew Kovacs. And just looking at that time, 4:33. They're going along okay, but this is very much a warm-up for the World Cup for them. And Sydney Uni are doing a pretty fine job of it now. You can see the clear water too. Conditions absolutely perfect for rowing, as it has been for much of the week.
It has been an incredible week, and I mean, this is what rowers want to see: fair racing, flat water. It doesn't get much better than this, and you can see the peloton over there on the bank. The coaches in the grey shirts are the Australian coaches, so following down their crews and looking intently and seeing what they can tweak in the lead up to the World Cup racing on the weekend. But certainly this crew looks incredibly dominant, and I think that they would take a lot of confidence from this row, and they'd be looking to go and execute their race plan, so they're not too worried about what's going on around them, whether there's crews in front or behind. Their only aim is to absolutely nail that race plan and do the best job that they can, almost like a time trial.
Interestingly enough too, this Sydney Uni crew rowing in the Australian boat, also with Australian blades, so that gives you an indication they're focused very much on the World Cup. With about 100 metres to go, it is very much Sydney Uni out in front with about 50 metres to go, just pulling away from the rest of the field. It is a battle at the moment for the minor placings. Coming through in the centre of the course is UTS, the Pine Rivers Composite also on the outside, and in lane 7 it is the ANA Composite from Western Australia. But crossing the line in first place, it is the Sydney Uni Composite as we see the battle for the minor placings, and coming through is the Pine Rivers Composite in second place. In third, in lane 4, it will be UTS, followed by the ANA Composite. And coming through now in the centre of the course, it is the Mercantile Composite with Sydney University, and a very convincing victory there for the Sydney Uni Composite, winning this race in emphatic fashion in the lead up to the World Cup on Sunday.
Impressive sculling there from Nick Purnell. We can see him on screen. Only young and not very experienced in the sculling, but did a tremendous job there in the stroke seat, setting up an absolutely dominant rhythm. You can see Shane Jackson there giving the thumbs up. A good, solid race by them.
Yes, and they are on the far side of the course there with the start. This Sydney Uni Composite, which will be rowing for Australia in the World Cup on Sunday, looking very powerful, very much as a unit. And a lot of experience there with Chris Morgan, Nicholas Purnell, Shane Jackson and Tom Swan. And midway through the race, they had it in their keeping. It won't be that way on Sunday. You'd like to think that it is going to be a little bit tougher for the Australians, with an international field, 18 countries here for the World Cup at the Sydney International Regatta Centre. Well, we've got some exciting racing coming up, including the Open Women's Quad Sculls coming up later this afternoon, featuring the Australian quad, which will be competing in the World Cup on Sunday. And we have a lot more action to come.